Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at the world of telepathy, hypnosis, and yoga.
Oh, wow.
And to help me out with this, I've got an expert in these topics joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah, me too. Now, this isn't just your, run-of-the-mill yoga class stuff. We're going deep into the history and kind of the ideas behind these practices. And to guide us on this journey, we're going to be looking at a book called Telepathy, Hypnosis, and Yoga.
Oh, hey.
The original title in Arabic is Siyas Yumi Shinti Sheoho. And it was written by Omar al-Hariri.
Very cool.
So what really struck me, as I was kind of skimming through the material was just how far back these practices go.
Yeah, that's one of the things that al-Hariri really emphasizes is the historical roots of these practices. He actually uses some really vivid imagery. Like he talks about these ancient Egyptian rituals and spiritual practices, really to kind of illustrate how these ideas have been present in different cultures for centuries.
And we're talking like ancient Egypt pyramids.
Exactly.
That's a long way from, our modern yoga studios.
Yeah, it really challenges the idea that these practices are just some, new age fad or something.
Okay.
He's really suggesting that they've been woven into the fabric of human experience for centuries.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So let's start with telepathy.
Okay.
I think, we've all had those moments where we're like, oh, pass the popcorn. Yeah. And our friend just somehow knows exactly what we want.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, you're actually closer than you think. Al-Hariri really explores this idea of whether we can actually communicate thoughts bypassing all of our usual senses.
So like a sixth sense.
It's kind of like that, yeah, tapping into a hidden channel of connection. He even shares some really compelling anecdotes from people who claim to have experienced this firsthand.
Okay, anecdotes. I'm all ears.
So, for example, there's this one story about a mother who felt this sudden, intense pain at the very moment her son was injured miles away.
Wow.
And then there's another one about a woman who dreamt that her friend won the lottery and then later found out that her friend had actually won that very night.
Okay. That's a little spooky.
Yeah.
I have to admit.
Right.
But it does make you kind of wonder,
yeah,
if there's more to our minds than we realize. And this is where yoga comes in, right?
Yes, exactly. Al-Hariri suggests that yoga might actually enhance our ability to experience telepathy.
Hold on. Yoga can boost telepathy.
It's a fascinating idea, right?
How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. Certain yogic practices, particularly those focused on energy work and meditation, they aim to cultivate this heightened state of awareness and sensitivity. And this could potentially make us more attuned to subtle energies, possibly even telepathic signals. It's like fine-tuning your senses to pick up on frequencies you weren't even aware of before.
So it's not just about, stretching and breathing.
Right.
It's about expanding your consciousness.
Exactly.
And maybe even tapping into these hidden abilities.
Precisely. And it's this connection between yoga and this heightened awareness that really sets the stage for exploring the potential interplay between all three of these practices.
Okay, so we've covered telepathy. We've touched on yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to hypnosis. What's Al-Hariri's take on that?
He sees hypnosis as a really powerful tool for accessing the subconscious mind, that hidden realm beneath our everyday thoughts and feelings.
Right.
Imagine uncovering forgotten memories or understanding the root causes of your habits,
So it's like shining a light on the hidden corners of our minds.
Exactly. And Al-Hariri explores how hypnosis might be used for therapeutic purposes, helping people overcome fears or break free from negative patterns.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But how does all of this telepathy, hypnosis, yoga,
right,
how does it all tie together?
Well, he suggests that they share a common thread, and that's the ability to influence and even alter our states of consciousness. It's about recognizing that our minds are far more powerful and flexible than we often realize.
Yeah, it's a great point. We often think of our minds as being very fixed, but maybe there's more fluidity there than we think.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is all incredibly fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners are just as captivated as I am.
I hope so.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the connections between these practices. So stay tuned. Welcome back.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of processing everything we just talked about with telepathy and hypnosis and yoga. It's like Al-Hariri is really asking us to rethink what we thought was possible.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's really challenging us to consider that these these ancient practices might hold keys to unlocking, deeper levels of human potential.
So last time we were talking about how these practices could potentially influence our states of consciousness.
Right.
But I'm curious, how they might actually work together. Does Al-Hariri give any specific examples of that interplay?
He does. For example, imagine combining hypnosis with your yoga practice. Using guided visualizations or affirmations while you're moving through the poses could really deepen your focus and enhance that mind-body connection.
So it's like adding a mental layer to the physical practice of yoga.
Exactly. And it could make it even more effective for stress relief and mindfulness.
Right. And I guess you could also think about it the other way around. Like the physical and breathing practices of yoga could prime someone to be more receptive to hypnotic suggestions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm starting to see how these practices could really complement and amplify each other.
Yeah.
What about telepathy and hypnosis? How do they connect?
Well, Al-Hariri suggests that the heightened state of awareness that you cultivate through hypnosis could make individuals more sensitive to telepathic communication.
So if I'm hypnotized, I'm more likely to pick up on someone else's thoughts.
Well, that's one possibility he explores. Yeah, the idea is that hypnosis could potentially lower those mental barriers that normally filter out subtle signals. It's like tuning your radio to a frequency you couldn't hear before.
Okay, that's fascinating. Like hypnosis could be a telepathic amplifier.
Exactly.
But with all this talk about influencing mental states, we have to consider the ethical implications here, right?
Oh, absolutely. Al-Hariri really emphasizes the importance of responsible and ethical practice, especially when it comes to hypnosis. You wouldn't want someone with, questionable intentions messing around with your subconscious.
Right. No, definitely not. So where would someone even begin if they were interested in exploring these practices safely?
Well, Al-Hariri stresses the importance of finding experienced and ethical guides, particularly for hypnosis. He also suggests visualization and concentration exercises for those interested in telepathy.
So it's about training your mental muscles, just like you would with physical exercise.
Exactly. And as we discussed earlier, finding a qualified yoga instructor who aligns with your goals is crucial. It's about matching your practice with your intentions.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but beyond finding the right teacher, what kind of mindset do you think is needed to really approach these practices effectively?
Well, Al-Hariri emphasizes patience, perseverance, and a genuine desire for self-discovery. He cautions against approaching them with a purely superficial attitude or seeking quick fixes.
Yeah.
These are ancient practices that require dedication and a sincere commitment to growth.
It's not about becoming Professor X overnight.
Right.
It's about understanding and harnessing the power of your own mind. But does all of this hold up scientifically? Is there any real evidence for telepathy or the benefits of hypnosis?
That's a crucial question, and Al-Hariri acknowledges that scientific evidence for these phenomena is often limited and debated.
Yeah.
He presents a compelling case. But ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide how much weight they give to the evidence and whether they're willing to embark on their own journey of exploration.
I like a journey of exploration. It's about being open-minded, but also using critical thinking. It's not about blindly accepting everything, but about delving deeper and forming your own conclusions.
Exactly. And that's where understanding the historical and cultural context can be so helpful. It provides a richer, more nuanced perspective on the potential and limitations of these practices in the modern world.
So it's about learning from the past to inform our understanding of the present.
Right.
What I find fascinating is how Al-Hariri connects these ancient practices to modern psychology and neuroscience.
Yeah, he delves into how our understanding of the brain has evolved and how these ancient practices might offer valuable insights into the workings of the human mind. For example, he compares the concept of prana in yoga, this vital life force energy, to modern understandings of energy flow within the body, like the nervous system and electromagnetic fields.
Like ancient wisdom meeting modern science?
Exactly. And he also explores how certain meditative practices in yoga, like focusing on the breath or repeating mantras, can have similar effects on the brain as mindfulness techniques that are used in modern psychotherapy.
That's fascinating. It shows that these practices aren't just mystical or esoteric. They have real potential applications in the modern world.
And that's what makes Al-Hariri's approach so compelling. He bridges the gap between ancient traditions and modern scientific understanding.
But throughout all of this, Al-Hariri keeps circling back to the importance of ethical considerations.
Yeah, he highlights the potential for misuse or abuse, especially with hypnosis. It's essential to work with ethical and experienced practitioners who prioritize the well-being of their clients. He also cautions against becoming overly reliant on these practices or using them as a quick fix for deeper psychological issues.
Right. It's about using these practices responsibly and in a balanced way, not as a crutch, but as a tool for growth, understanding.
Exactly. He reminds us that these practices can be powerful and even disruptive, so it's important to approach them with respect and mindfulness, recognizing the potential impact they can have on ourselves and others.
So much to consider. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from al-Hariri's exploration? And welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Omar al-Hariri's telepathy, hypnosis, and yoga. We've explored how these practices might work together and their historical significance, and even how they connect to modern science. But there's one thing I'm really curious about.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
You mentioned earlier that the book includes some pretty striking imagery, and I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what kind of visuals does al-Hariri actually use?
Well, he includes this collection of images that depict ancient rituals and practices related to telepathy and spirituality. For example, there's an image of a Native American shaman performing a ceremony dressed in elaborate attire and holding a ceremonial drum.
Wow.
And then there's another one that shows an African tribal leader seemingly in a trance state, communicating with spirits.
Yeah, those images sound incredibly powerful. What's the purpose of including them in a book about, telepathy, hypnosis, and yoga?
Well, I think they serve several purposes. For one, they provide a visual link to the historical context that al-Hariri emphasizes throughout the book. They remind us that these practices aren't just abstract concepts. They've been woven into human cultures for centuries.
Yeah, it's like seeing the history come to life through these images.
Exactly. And I think they also act as symbols, evoking a sense of mystery and wonder. They invite us to engage with these practices on a deeper, more intuitive level.
It's like they're sparking our imagination. Inviting us to consider the possibilities beyond what we can see and touch.
Precisely. It's not just about intellectual understanding, but about experiencing these practices on a visceral level. And this brings us back to one of the core messages of the book, the importance of self-discovery. Al-Hariri encourages readers to approach these practices not as a means to gain power over others, but as a path to understanding themselves and their place in the universe.
It's about turning inward, exploring the potential within, rather than seeking to control or manipulate the external world.
Exactly. He reminds us that true power lies not in dominating others, but in mastering oneself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the most powerful message is the invitation to question our assumptions about the nature of reality and the limits of human potential. The book reminds us that we're still in the early stages of understanding consciousness, and that within each of us lies the potential for extraordinary experiences and abilities.
It's about embracing the unknown, questioning the status quo, and being open to possibilities that might seem impossible at first glance. Who knows? Maybe by exploring these practices, we can unlock hidden dimensions within ourselves and connect with the world in ways we never thought possible. It's been an incredible journey exploring these ideas with you. Thanks for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.